I hate the Pelicans. Because they're doing their media day photos, and they took a photo with four players: Zion, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, and now DeJounte Murray. And they just told Herb to go kick rocks. So
Bruh.
I hope Herb gets traded to the Thunder. We'll take him. We'll
Herb
trade.
would be the reason that team wins games.
Herb's the only reason they won games before.
The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome in, students, to the game. My name is Alex Baumann, and I'm joined by my co-host today, Gray Oldenburg and Nathan Glidewell. Week 5 of the college football season has come and gone. Gray wishes college football never started after what Auburn's been doing these past 5 weeks. Nathan is very excited to talk about Alabama, if I had to guess. So we're going to talk about that and other games. And then we're going to go through what Matthew Sluka and Bear Alexander did, self-redshirting for NIL situations. So we'll go over that. But let's start off with Alabama and Auburn. Usually I just pick here, guys, who goes first. But we have a really good game, probably the game of the year so far, Georgia-Alabama. And then a game everybody wishes they could forget with Auburn and Oklahoma. Who do y'all want to start with here?
I want to start with Auburn.
Okay.
You just want to get
That's
Gray
fine.
fired
That's
up?
fine.
Yeah, I'm not sure he wants to get out of the way.
Let's get this out now and let's be done with it. And then that way we can talk about that fantastic game in Tuscaloosa this past weekend, and getting to talk about some of that NIL stuff will be funny as well. Okay. I've been thinking since I walked out of the stadium. I've been thinking about what I'm going to say on this show here tonight. And I'm still just utterly speechless because every other time, the last 4 games, even in Auburn's 2 wins, there's always been something to point to. There's always been, oh, this was good, but this was bad. This needs to be improved, but this was looking better. In all 4 games. You talk about the Alabama A&M game and the New Mexico game, the 2 wins. Talk about how improved we were. Talking about the new quarterback play with Hank Brown in New Mexico, how that was, but it was also Alabama A&M. It was New Mexico. And then in the California and Arkansas game, I got up here and said, you outplayed them, but you threw it to them 4 times each. And it was just like, all right, you don't do that, you're 4-0 and looking pretty good. But I'm just looking up and down this box score and stat sheet from the Auburn-Oklahoma game on Saturday. And if you completely take off the final score and make Auburn-Oklahoma Team A and Team B, I would have put the final score 34-10 or 34-13 in favor of Auburn. Auburn outgained Oklahoma 482-291 in total yardage. Auburn had 15 more first downs in this game. Oklahoma's offense had 2 big plays. Otherwise, Auburn's defense played the best game that they've played all year. The game plan was fantastic offensively and defensively. Big-time players made the big-time plays like Jarquez Hunter, like Keandre Lambert-Smith, Malcolm Simmons, and Cam Coleman. And defensively, just guys flying around everywhere, seeing the freshmen really make plays defensively, guys like DeMarcus Riddick, Jay Crawford, Amaris Williams, those guys that we've been wanting to see more of, they finally did it. And then you look at the score, and you lost. And it's just, that's gut punching because of how well Auburn played against I know they were really hurt, but that Oklahoma team isn't bad. I think they're middle of the pack SEC. They're not they shouldn't be ranked, but it's not like that was Arkansas, or it's not like that was New Mexico. That was the best team you've played so far. And that was the best you've looked so far. And we could very easily be sitting here talking about how Auburn's 5-0 going to Athens. In fact, that's what we were all expecting. But now we're talking about, oh my God, Auburn's 2-3. And in this sport, you get judged based on results. Hugh Freeze said in his Monday morning press conference, he's like, in this sport, you get judged based on results, not progress, not how you looked. you get judged based on the win-loss column and the final score, which completely makes sense. And I hate silver linings because this Auburn team is 2-3. But this Auburn team is also better in every single statistical category from a year ago, except for 2, turnovers and wins. Those are the only 2 that Auburn is worse in than this time last year. And that's all you can ask for, to be honest, in a second-year head coach and Hugh Freeze with a whole new, basically a whole new staff behind him. And, he also said in this press conference, what he inherited. He inherited a roster that was in the dumps. Brian Harsin put Auburn back 5-6 years. Hugh Freeze inherited a better roster when he took over Ole Miss and when he took over Liberty than he did when he took over Auburn. So yes, you be patient, but again, it's just gut punching to not see the success that we're seeing on the field come in the final score. Or the success that you're seeing in the box score show up at the top of the box score. That's really, really hard. Obviously, in this game, Peyton Thorne played an incredible 58 minutes of football. I thought it was the best game he's played. I thought it was comparable to the Arkansas game last year in Fayetteville. He looked comfortable. He looked like he was going to do everything possible for Auburn to win that game. I mean, he got strip sacked on like a 2nd and 6, and the ball bounced forward, and he swam move an Oklahoma defender to go recover it, and it was a first down. He recovered it past the first down marker. And he was incredible. His balls were on point. He was efficient. He played great until he didn't. Until he threw it to the other team, which you just can't do. I read a stat that was in the last 40 seasons, Auburn has played a top 25 team, home or away, 105 times and thrown the ball over 20 times, 105 times against top 25 teams. 105 different times in the last 40 years. And in terms of efficiency, Peyton Thorne's performance against Oklahoma on Saturday was the 5th best of all those Auburn quarterbacks' performances. It was the 5th best out of 105. He was the only one in the top 32 that lost the game. It's it's just gut punching the way you lose that game. Jarquez Hunter was fantastic. They run the ball from 6 yards a carry. He's one of the best backs in the SEC. I wish Auburn would use him more in the passing game. He's really shown improvement there. I think, especially when you go away from home, you play this tough schedule with Georgia, Missouri, and Kentucky coming up here in October. Use him out of the backfield. Go use those little RPOs and swing him out in the flat. You saw that a couple times against Oklahoma and even against Arkansas. I want to see that more. I'm excited about that. The wide receivers, I mean, Auburn hasn't had a wide receiver room like this in so long, and it's just so refreshing. Keandre Lambert-Smith is on pace to be Auburn's first 1,000-yard receiver since Courtney Taylor in 2004, which is mind-boggling. But, when Gene Chizik was here and when Tommy Tuberville was here and when Gus Malzahn was here, Auburn had 1,000-yard rushers. They didn't have 1,000-yard receivers. And that's just the way it was. But Keandre Lambert-Smith is, I think he's the best wide receiver that's stepped foot in an Auburn uniform since Sammy Coates did back in 2014. Malcolm Simmons making big plays. Cam Coleman making big plays. Good to see him back and healthy. I wish we would use him a little differently. It seems like we're really trying to use him in the short to intermediate passing game. I really wish we would use Jarquez Hunter to make teams have to guard Cam Coleman and Keandre Lambert-Smith one-on-one, because those two guys are going to win one-on-one matchups. And Peyton Thorne, as many interceptions as he's thrown this year, he can put it to where Lambert-Smith and Cam Coleman can get it. And he's done it. But we need to do that more. And that's definitely something that Hugh Freeze and Derek Nix see and want to see moving forward. And then just a quick discussion on the defense before we just kind of move on from this horrible game. Just like I said, the freshmen played absolutely great. I was really impressed with how the freshmen looked defensively, especially DeMarcus Riddick. He's a guy that, coming into the year, I was like, he's going to get playing time. We're going to see him out there. Don't know how much we're going to see him out there over Eugene Asante and Austin Keys and Dorian Mausi. But DeMarcus Riddick led Auburn in tackles on Saturday and was flying around everywhere. Obviously, Keldrick Falk and Kaden Lee, the two guys that I know for a fact will be NFL players on this defense, played great. Jay Crawford, the four-star corner that we got this past year, who obviously has got to step up with the injury to Champ Anthony last week in the Arkansas game, and stepped up really well in that Arkansas game. Really, really played well in this Oklahoma game. I know Oklahoma didn't have any receivers on their roster healthy, at least. And Oklahoma didn't have like a true passing quarterback. Michael Hawkins is a very run-first quarterback, and that's what their whole philosophy was in this game. And Auburn stopped it really, really well. And Jay Crawford was a huge part of that. He was out there for every single snap in Saturday's game. He was not thrown to once. And that is impressive, especially being a freshman. Brent Venables knows, even though I don't have my full lineup at wide receiver and I've got a freshman at quarterback, I can still try and pick on other freshmen, but he didn't. They didn't pick on Jay Crawford. I think that's a big deal. And also really got to shout out Caleb Harris, who's the second highest graded safety in the country. The two highest graded safeties in the country this past week were Auburn and Alabama freshman safeties, Red Morgan for Alabama and Caleb Harris for Auburn. I think the defense, the freshmen making the impact are so important. The atmosphere was great. It was a lot of fun. Just sucks that you lost. Hey, it's a great game. It sucks that you lost.
Every week, Auburn finds a different way to lose, and I hope for your sake, Gray, the rest of the season they don't continue to disappoint you. But with their matchups upcoming, it's only getting worse.
No,
this was the easy part of your schedule, or supposed to be, and you are 2-3 with a losing record. And like I said, it doesn't get any better for Auburn and Hugh Freeze. Season's basically a wash now. You're 2-3. I really don't think there's a path for you to make the college football playoff, and there's really not a path for you to make a big bowl game at this point.
I would argue there's very little chance you make a bowl game at this point, given your schedule, just because of how many away games you play and the magnitude of it. Like, but who does Auburn have left at home? Yale Monroe. I think that's the win. Vandy at home. So 3 very winnable games, and then you got a steel road game. You steal Kentucky,
Georgia,
maybe.
Missouri, Missouri, Kentucky, and Bama.
And that's saying those 3 games are guaranteed wins, and we at this point we know with this team nothing is a guarantee, especially after this past game. I don't know. It's honestly comedic at this point how it's the same mistakes over and over and over again, and every single week we think Auburn will just make the adjustments and things will be better. And it's not like they're playing bad. It's just they make the mistakes where they don't need to make the mistakes. Yeah. It's and Gray gets this because I'm a Saints fan, and I'm sure at some point we talk about what happened with them this past weekend. But I just continuously had to suffer through what the Saints do, and it's basically the same thing Auburn does. They do everything correctly until they don't.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's frustrating to constantly watch your team shoot themselves in the foot and give the game away when you should win. You should win. And to go off what Hugh Freeze says about if we play them 9 more times, we'd win those 9 times. I don't agree with him saying it, but I mean, I think most people know it's true. Arkansas, I mean, they're not that great, and playing at Auburn, they probably wouldn't win if they play him 9 more times.
Right.
If Auburn doesn't make those mistakes, those are historic mistakes. I mean, how many times do you turn the ball over 5 times in the game? And for an Auburn team, I know that's crazy because you already did it twice in one season.
Mhm.
So it's just a matter of this is the worst it could possibly be, and you can only go up from here. Is what I'm going to continue to say, and then it turns out I'm probably just jinxing y'all by saying that. And that I'm the curse because I continuously say you're gonna get better, and it hasn't. Hugh Freeze still has his work cut out for him. It all comes down to quarterback play. I think Peyton Thorne did such a better job this weekend. It's just throwing it on unnecessary downs. Like in that situation, you want to see Auburn go to dark west. I mean, you're at a little past midfield. I mean, let's say you run the ball, you pick up 3. Hey, that's a prime spot to go for it. Or you can punt it, pin Oklahoma deep. They haven't been really throwing the ball well that game. I mean, they haven't been able to move the ball that well. It's just one of those situations where I think Peyton Thorne was put in a bad spot with the play calling, and Peyton Thorne also just made a bad read. I mean, he's had moments like that all season, but
Yeah.
it doesn't get
Auburn's
any
not that far
easier.
off. Yeah, Auburn's not that far off. I think the 24 class and the the upcoming 2025 class in terms of recruiting understands that Auburn. I think if you look at it theoretically, of course, I know Auburn's 2-3, and they're kind of the comedy of the SEC at this point because they've outplayed 5 games, but they're 2-3. But if you look at it theoretically and objectively, Auburn is a few pieces and a few mistakes from being a top 15 team going into Athens on Saturday. And, I still don't think that that's a game that you win because you haven't beaten Georgia there in 20 years. But it's a completely different outlook on the season. Just like you were saying, Nathan, we're talking about how can Auburn get to 6 wins? How can they go bowling? If Auburn's 5-0 right now, it's less about that and more about, well, how close are they going to be to Georgia? How bad are they going to beat Missouri? How bad are they going to beat Texas A&M? Could they give Alabama a run for their money in Tuscaloosa instead of what in the world are we going to beat Vanderbilt? We've got to beat Texas A&M at the end of the year. So it's too complete just because a few plays of mistakes from your offense. It's a completely different outlook on the season and on your team. But I think the coaching staff, most of the players, especially the young guys, and then this upcoming recruiting class understand that, okay, Auburn's literally a few pieces away, another recruiting class away, a new quarterback away, a different quarterback away from competing at the top of the SEC, which is what Hugh Freeze's goal was to get Auburn to in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I think Hugh Freeze's big problem was he got cheap on the position you can't get cheap on in the offseason. That was quarterback. He did not invest in it at all. He just brought back Peyton Thorne and said, yep, last season showed me something I liked, and we're going to roll with it. And we roll with it, and it's not good. Can't get cheap on quarterback. It's the most difficult, most important position on any team to win a football game, and Auburn doesn't have a quarterback competent enough to apparently win the football game. Peyton Thorne showed flashes, and then in the final 2 minutes, he forgets he's playing quarterback for the Auburn Tigers. Let's move on to Alabama, Nathan, which was the game of the year. I think it'll end up being the game of the year outside of the college football playoff and what will happen there. Alabama jumps out to 28-0 lead, takes a 30-7 lead into the half, but then Georgia storms back in the second half and takes the lead. But Alabama answers with a 75-yard touchdown to Ryan Williams, and the defense gets a stop, and they win the game. You went to Bryant-Denny to watch this. What was that experience like, Nathan, watching this game in that crowd, in that stadium?
I know we've gone with game of the year, And I've heard people say game of the year, game of the season. This is probably the best game I've ever witnessed, ever seen. It was different seeing it in person, but I have not witnessed a better game than that, and that even includes Iron Bowls. I mean, we went to 4 overtime Iron Bowl win. Bryce Young just absolutely willing Alabama to a victory there. We watched Jalen Monroe complete a 4th and 31 pass, and insane unlikely odds to win that game. I've been to countless other games that have been close against big opponents, but this one takes the cake. It had everything you wanted to see. I think you talk about the magnitude of the game, what was at stake for each team, and what was going to be written in the papers after the game concluded, given each result. So there was a lot at stake, and I think that's what made it such a big game. Not even to mention what actually happened in the game. But Bryant Denny, that was the loudest I've ever. I mean, that stadium was the loudest I've ever been in, and I'm sure. I mean, you can talk about Death Valley and all these other stadiums across the country. But I mean, Alabama's doing something right. As far as crowd goes, I mean, that was fantastic. Now to talk about the game, I guess I'll go ahead and split this into 2 halves because that's just how it went. Alabama comes rolling out of the gate. I mean, throwing haymakers, throwing punches. I mean, they just looked absolutely dominant on both ends of the ball. Alabama on the offensive end was able to put together long drives and sustained drives, and convert when they needed to, and they made plays. They scored at the end of the first quarter, 21-0. The play calling was fantastic. Jalen Monroe just looked completely comfortable in what he was able to do. And even on plays that broke down, he was able to make the right decision, escape out of the pocket, and pick up big yards. Not much more you can ask for. I mean, it was pretty much to the point where Georgia was demoralized. They were like shocked that Alabama came out the way they did. And it was, I think about the first drive, Alabama went down. We put up 7. I was like, okay, let's not get comfortable. The defense comes out, they instantly get a stop. We get the ball back, instantly go back down, drive down the field, score again. Defense gets a pick, positive field position, go down, you score again, and by the time you look at it, it's 21-0. That's just how quick the game went. And then you get into the second quarter, and you put up another touchdown after getting a stop. It's 28-0. And that at that point, you feel like Alabama's in this just comfortable position where it's already wrapped. So it's already, people were talking about shorting the quarters in the second half because it was such a bloodbath. And of course, Georgia ends up getting on the board in that quarter. Alabama ends up getting a safety on a Carson Beck, actually chunks it out the end zone because he's about to get his head taken off because Kane Womack and his crazy self sent basically everyone on a blitz. He said engage 8, and that's what happened. So Alabama had a 30-7 lead at half. It should have been better. I will continue to say this. I think officiating across the country has been very putrid this season. And time again, it has affected the results of games. And in this instance where Alabama had a chance to go down and score more points before the half, at least put up 3, there was an egregious pass interference miss. I mean, wide receiver gets, I believe it was German Mar, just absolutely get tackled. Reminds, and as a Saints fan, I just have flashbacks. So it did nothing for me in my mental stability. To have that happen, of course, I thought that Kalen DeBoer was about to kill the official. The side judge just sat there and just had his hands in his pocket. He didn't know what was going on. But it's stuff like that. That's the difference between having 3 points and no points, which turned out to be huge at the end of the game. And we can talk about the Miami Virginia Tech game on that Friday night. That's another just complete episode of officiating just being so terrible. And throughout the game, I thought they did a fine job, but there were moments like those are the type of calls they didn't call it consistently, and you want them to call it a certain way and stick with it, and not just completely change it when you get into a second half of a game. So that was frustrating. But Alabama had a lot of points on the field. Going into half up 30-7. I didn't want us to be complacent because Georgia and the amount of talent they have on that team, Kirby Smart, given the type of coach he is, you knew that they were going to come out firing, and they did. I felt like Alabama kind of just got complacent. We took a step back. We kind of just sat in our chair and just watched the game instead of actually playing it. Defense gave up too much. We couldn't get off the field on third and fourth down. That was very frustrating. I believe Georgia for the night was, Georgia was perfect on fourth downs throughout the night. They did everything perfect as far as offensive capabilities in the second half. They took care of business on that end. I mean, Carson Beck, I know we can trash him for his first half performance and the number of pick-worthy balls that he threw throughout the game. I thought that he just did not do a great job of really identifying coverages at times, but he willed Georgia back into this game. He threw fantastic balls in the second half. He put it in places only his receiver could get. I mean, half the time it would be fourth down. He threw a slant, and you didn't know the ball was caught. But if it was, I mean, there's nothing better the defensive back could have done. I mean, you literally could have just tackled the dude, and he still would have caught it because Carson Beck threw that great of a ball. And I think that's one thing he's been really great at, even go back to last year. But I thought King Womack got really conservative in his defensive play calling, and he's like, okay, we're gonna keep everything in front of us. We're just gonna slow down the game. We're not gonna be aggressive. We're not gonna bring any more blitzes, and we're just gonna sit back. And that's when Georgia started saying, okay, we can just do whatever we want. Carson Beck took advantage of it, picked us apart in the short game, in the intermediate game. And then when we started playing down on that, we got beat over the top. And they took advantage of the inexperience of our young defensive backs. Xavier Brown was picked on several times in that game, especially in the second half. It's just moments like that where it was frustrating to see us not be able to get off the field. And I'm sure there were calls that extended Georgia drives and led to them scoring. There was a phantom pass interference call on Deontay Lawson when he didn't even touch the dude. It's moments like that where it's like they're changing the outcome of the game, and that's what's frustrating as a fantasy. And I'm sure there were multiple times that Alabama probably did stuff that was illegal, and they missed that. So I'm not saying that it's just Alabama bias. It's across the board. So it's stuff like that. But it's just Alabama's offense in the second half. We got so conservative. We could not establish a running game at all. And
Zero.
It's frustrating because you have a good offensive line, and we tried to run outside. We tried to stretch the field, run up the middle. You have great guards. You have probably the best guard in the country in Tyler Booker. Caden Proctor has been playing some of his best football I've ever seen, and Parker Brailsford has been a solid center all year. Run it to that side. Run it to the left. But instead, it felt like every single time we called a run play, it was always Jalen Milroe design run or read option, or we're going to try to stretch the field and play against Georgia's speed, which I didn't agree with. I wanted us to go ahead and dominate the line of scrimmage. That was one of the keys to the game for me, and we just didn't do that. It was very disappointing. Jalen Milroe had his way in the first half running the ball. I mean, he was able to do whatever he wanted. Georgia cracked down on it in the second half. They were able to figure out a game plan that worked against him. And Alabama just looked so one-dimensional. We couldn't pass the ball because they were already stacking the box. And of course, you get to third and long, they're just going to sit back and play the line. And several times Alabama would, we get in this 4th and 1 scenario, and we'd have to punt the ball back. And 3 and outs or just not long enough drives, your defense gets tired over and over and over again. They're on the field. Georgia's time of possession in the second half was absolutely wild. It felt like every single time you looked up, they had the ball and they were marching. So it's stuff like that where a great team will take advantage of the situation they were put in. And I felt like Alabama didn't do that in the second half. And that's one thing. If they want to continue on this trajectory, if they want to go and win a national championship, they have to take advantage of the situation they're put in and say, hey, we're up 30-7. Let's not let off the gas pedal. Let's continue to do what we were doing in the first half and control the game. That's one thing that Saban's teams have always been able to be good at, is controlling the game. So that's a big thing. Credit to Georgia. I mean, fighting all the way back and taking the lead. Being on the other side, I think it's crazy because we sit here so many times and talk about how Alabama comes fighting all the way back and retaking the lead and then winning the game. Being on the other side of that, it's like a stab in the chest. I mean, when Georgia took the lead, I'm just sitting in the stands, head in my hands. I'm just like, how in the world did we let them consistently just do this over and over and over again? And you just look up and they've taken the lead. It was like what, 34-33 or something like that. On the yeah. So after the failed 2-point conversion, and at that time there's still 2 minutes left. You feel like there's no way Alabama wins the game because you've been so stagnant on offense in the second half. You haven't had an answer. You've just kind of sat back and it costs you. I felt like we were going to lose the game and I was never going to go watch an Alabama football game ever again. I remember us texting and you were telling me to quit being an Auburn fan. Well, I will stop being an Auburn fan when we stop playing like an Auburn team. That's exactly what I said. And fortunately we did. We stopped playing like an Auburn team. Jalen Monroe connects with Ryan Williams on a 75-yard touchdown pass in one play after Georgia took the lead, and every single piece of momentum Georgia had went away. It was gone. Ryan Williams, he is the best freshman receiver in the country, and
17 years old, by the way.
Yeah, if you forgot, I know Gray's gonna have it come apart if he hears that again. But now there's a legitimate argument to say he is one of the best receivers in the country. He has been absolutely terrific. I mean, as far as caliber receivers Alabama has had as freshmen, you talk about Amari Cooper, you talk about Julio. I mean, you can go down the list of how many Alabama receivers have come in as freshmen. They have not had the type of start to their career as Ryan Williams has had, and he is certainly a generational talent. And there's another one in Ohio State, Jeremiah Smith, who is right there. Cam Coleman is right there. If he was utilized a bit more, he'd be in that conversation right there. So, I mean, you can sit here and talk about the wide receiver class coming out of high school this past season. I mean, it's been fantastic. But Ryan Williams, I mean, he was forced to his stats from the game: 6 receptions, 177 yards, a touchdown. I mean, he absolutely made 2 Georgia defenders just look absolutely silly. I mean, throughout the game, he was giving Malachi Starks, who it will be in the NFL that season, he will be a first-round draft pick. He was making him look silly. So
tip drill.
I don't understand how in the world he's in the situation he was. But very thankful that he was able to make that play. I just thinking back on it, I mean, I thought we were dead in the water, honestly. It's one of those situations where I didn't even want to watch the rest of the game. I just wanted to sit back and die. That's what I wanted to do. I was completely fine and complacent with doing that, but Ryan Williams said no. And I will say this about Xavier Brown, because after getting picked apart the whole game and including the final drive, I felt like he still got picked on. He stepped up. He made a play, and that, I mean, he's very talented. He's a freshman. He's very inexperienced, but he is also very talented, and he's also very smart. And he finally figured it out that he was able to play off the ball and keep his eyes in the backfield and read Carson back and make a great play on the ball. And I mean, he won the ball game. So I credit Xavier Brown with the adjustments he was able to make. I really thought that's a play where he stepped up. He stopped being a freshman at that point, and he became a certified starting cornerback in college football. So huge credit to Kalen DeBoer for the game plan that he had, because I think Alabama, even being in the situation to be up that much and still winning the game, I think Kalen DeBoer did a fantastic job, and the number of big games he's won now, I mean, you can get on the list. Even going back to Washington last year and the games he was able to win, his resume continues to look better. But Jalen Monroe and the step he has taken this season compared to last, it's nothing short of incredible. I mean, his completion percentage thing is up like 20%. He was at the 72% completion margin. I mean, that's absurd. His sack ratio when he gets pressured, it's down a good 15%. He's able to make he's able to have great pocket presence. And turnover worthy plays, I think it sits at 0.9 when it was close to I don't even know. It was very high last year. So he has made a huge jump. He played a fantastic game. I mean, at half, he had more yards himself than the entire Georgia team. And he is just that caliber of player that he changes games. He is the X factor. He is one of the main reasons Alabama was able to win this game. And I mean, he has a legitimate shot to win the Heisman. And as far as leaders go, he has developed into this great leader that I mean, I attribute to Jalen Hurts, Bryce Young, Mac Jones had that type of leadership too, where it's focusing on the task at hand and not focusing on individual achievements. They want to win. They want to be able to win. They want to take care of business. They have that 1-0 mentality, as he says, every single game. And he has turned into this terrific leader. And I am, for one, proud of him because I know that a number of Alabama fans, including myself at times, have completely dogged on him for the way he has played. But that man, I mean, he knows what he's doing. He takes care of business. I am unbelievably proud of him and the Alabama team for what they were able to accomplish this past Saturday. And I guess to finish it off, to put a little cute bow on it, Kirby Smart and Georgia football does not have a Nick Saban problem. They have an Alabama problem. And until they figure it out, Alabama is their daddy. Jalen Milroe is going to win the Heisman. Ryan Williams is the best receiver in college football. Thank you.
Well, that's a bold statement to make at the end there. I will say this before I move on to the other games. I talked about it when we previewed this game. Georgia starts off games very poorly. You looked at the Clemson game and other games they played. Very slow start. And their very slow start this game was the reason they lost this game. If they had started hot or a little bit better than they did, this game result might have been a little bit different than Alabama taking the win. It might have been Georgia. But the slow start really hampered the rest of the game. You had to avoid the running game because you had to let Carson Beck air it out to get that lead back. And that was the big issue for Georgia. Is you start out slow, you're not going to win against these teams that start out really hot like Bama did. And you're going to have to play Texas, who's very similar to Bama, where they're going to get out and they're going to run. And they're going to get out to that lead if you don't defend it well, like Georgia didn't do this game. Let's move on to the other games around the country. Kentucky upsets number 6 Ole Miss 20-17. The game Nathan was talking about earlier, after officials declared what would have been the game-winning Hail Mary catch incomplete, number 7 Miami escaped Virginia Tech 38-34. Number 24 Texas A&M won the Southwest Classic versus Arkansas 21-17. It's 17. It's the last time that we played at AT&T Stadium, with moving to home and away matchups here on out, with them being that way. North Carolina blew a 20-0 lead to Duke to lose their second straight game. Mac Brown, I said it last week, sweetheart, it is time to retire, hang it up, and go retire on the beach somewhere. You are long overdue to be retired. I appreciate what you did for college football in your time, but it's time to go. Number 23 Kansas State beat number 20 Oklahoma State 42-20, and that's after Kansas State lost 30-9 last week to BYU, and the guy had to do something with a Taco Bell menu item. That was happening. Number 12 Michigan escaped Minnesota 27-24, and somehow they managed to pass for 86 yards this week and still win a football game. I guess Michigan's back in the 1930s running the wishbone and all that stuff, forgetting that passing is part of the game. Number 22, BYU beat Baylor 34-28, and they are the only unbeaten team left in the Big 12. And they sit with Colorado and a couple other teams atop that conference as unbeaten teams in the Big 12 conference play-wise. Number 13, USC pulled away from Wisconsin late to win 38-21. Number 16, Notre Dame held off a late push from number 15, Louisville, to win 31-24. Louisville, I thought they might give them a scare here. They did, but turnovers and inability to convert fourth downs really cost them. Florida State, have the mighty have fallen, fall to 1-4 after a 42-16 loss to SMU. And Fortunate news, however you want to look at this. DJU, the quarterback, is expected to miss a few weeks with a broken finger on his throwing hand. Could have confused me. I thought he had it the entire season and not just this game. The way he's throwing the football. After a sluggish start, Texas pulled away from Mississippi State 35-13. Late touchdown in the second half really jump-started Texas's offense and led them to pulling away from Mississippi State. Indiana beat Maryland 42-28 to start 5-0 for the first time in 57 years. Nick Saban disciple Kurt Sangetti has that team humming. And then Ashton Denty continued a Heisman campaign with 269 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns in Boise State's 45-24 win over Washington State. And just to preface this, he has 82 carries, 145 yards, and 13 touchdowns. In 4 games.
In 4 games.
And he got pulled to the half of the Portland State game. So it's really 3.5 games. 2 more games here. Colorado beat UCF 48-21. And then Arizona upset number 10 Utah 23-10 with Cam Rising missing his 3rd straight game. I don't know if he's going to play football ever again. He needs to just go ahead and get employed somewhere, sign up on LinkedIn, get him a job at an insurance company or something. It's time to go, buddy.
There's a lot of insurance in Utah.
Before we talk about like the game we really want to focus in on, I want to sit here and talk about Kentucky and Ole Miss.
Okay, thank you.
Because Damian Harris had a interesting take on CBS, and he described Lane Kiffin as a front runner. He says the team is built on jumping out to an early lead and airing the ball out knowing you're going to win by 50 to 60 points. They're not a team that can win an ugly game. They're not a team that's built for a dogfight. They're built to play ahead and coast the rest of the game. Do you agree with Damian Harris's take of Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss?
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. I think Lane Kiffin should have done a little less time chatting about Hugh Freeze and Auburn this week in his press conferences on his Twitter and started focusing more on Kentucky. This is an Ole Miss team that, look, you're only going to get so far at Ole Miss. I mean, come on, folks. Like, it's Ole Miss. We've been saying that for forever. Ole Miss is as high as they're going to get. And what Hugh Freeze got them to and what Lane Kiffin has gotten them to, that's as high as Ole Miss is going to go because it's Ole Miss. You're in Oxford, Mississippi. Their players don't want to go there and play football for you. They want to go to the Alabamas and Georgias and Ohio States and Texas and LSU. They don't want to go to Ole Miss. They don't want to come to the SIP. That's ridiculous. Ole Miss people are absolutely ludicrous.
Come on, you don't want to come to the SIP, Gray?
No. I'll never go over there.
What if I give you $1 million?
That's a pretty town. That's a pretty
Kiffin?
college, but absolutely not. This is an Ole Miss team that has the talent, especially offensively, to be one of the top.
Not the offensive line.
None of that offensive line, position wise. They've got at least 2 NFL receivers. Jackson Dart's going to be an NFL quarterback. They are really good offensively. But why can't you score an opening drive against Kentucky, and then it's like for the 45 minutes in between you scoring again, they don't know how to move the ball against Kentucky at home. I don't understand that. I thought it was hilarious. I think Ole Miss, people were starting to talk about Ole Miss being in the upper tier of a program in the SEC. What a bunch of idiots. What a bunch of absolute fools. You all think Ole Miss is one of the top teams in the SEC. There are teams in the SEC right now that are down or maybe not as good, that are 1,000,000 times better programs than Ole Miss, like Texas A&M, like LSU, like Auburn, like Florida. Ole Miss, that's as high as you're going to get, and you're still losing to Kentucky. I'm sorry. Y'all suck.
There's a lot of hatred from Gray to Ole Miss.
Not
sure what the cause of that is, but there's a lot of hatred there.
Needs to keep your damn mouth shut.
I will say this. Ole Miss got punched in the mouth Saturday by Kentucky. Kentucky pretty much tried to replicate what they did against Georgia. It's that they decided to actually get in the end zone this time.
Score.
And be aggressive.
Or they found out that they can score 6 points instead of 3. I know, mind boggling. Mark Stoops is a genius, by the way. He found out he can score 7 points. That's insane.
On one possession.
7 whole points? No way. When they come up with that? But Kentucky figured out that they could do that. They had a great game plan, punched Ole Miss in the mouth. Ole Miss struggled to respond. As far as the offensive line for Ole Miss goes, Deion Walker said, "Man, I see a bunch of Big Mats and filet fishes," and he got to eating. Big man got to eating. He took care of business. Was impressed with him. It's still insane how he moves with how big he is. He's just a freak of nature. But I will say this about Brock Vandergriff. I thought he took a huge step forward. He struggled to pass the ball. Even going back to the South Carolina game, where I forget, he only had like 30-some yards, maybe less than that. It was just absolutely putrid. And then in the Georgia game, he didn't look great, but he made several huge plays in this game to put Kentucky in the situation to win. And I think that's really all you can ask for from Brock. I mean, I thought he did a terrific job with that. Kentucky's offensive line controlled the line of scrimmage well. I thought they ran the ball okay. I really thought the wideouts for Kentucky took a huge step. But what it comes down to, Kentucky's defense was able to keep Ole Miss's offense off the field, and it forced Lane Kiffin to play a completely different style of game, to where it was really just Mark Stoops controlling every single aspect of what happened, and that is really the reason why Kentucky won. I know they had this huge 4th-down conversion to really put them in a situation to win, but Mark Stoops did a fantastic job of once again putting his team in a situation where they just had to execute to win the game. And as far as coaching goes, I mean, that was one of the better coaching jobs I've seen in a while. Kentucky going into Oxford and upsetting Ole Miss is absolutely insane. I don't think it was on my bingo card this year. I don't think it was on anyone's bingo card. But they really took care of business. And if Kentucky would have won last week, I think it's a completely different conversation. Like, is Kentucky really just underrated in the SEC? And really, they hadn't lost to South Carolina in the fashion they did, and the absolute just bludgeoning it was. Kentucky looks like this completely better team. And then we're also having the conversation where Georgia already has 2 losses into the season, which is scary. And I think Georgia fans are already chattering the teeth because they still have to go play at Texas. They still have Tennessee and Ole Miss. So I think that's another thing to talk about. But yeah, credit to Mark Stoops. I'm impressed.
I think there's really other one game we want to talk about here, that being the Miami game and their escape against Virginia Tech. The officials ruled that Hail Mary completion on the field, then came back, reversed the call to an incomplete pass. In a statement, the ACC said the pass was ruled incomplete because the ball was touched by a Miami player while he was out of bounds. Worth noting that this is the same referee who worked the Miami Duke game in 2015, where he and other officials were suspended for 2 games for a series of errors on the play where Miami used 8 laterals to win the game as time expired. Not saying it's the officials' call, because he had to talk to the ACC team outside of the game, the replay crew, and the call was made that it was incomplete. Do we agree with the call?
No.
Nope.
Just because somebody is touching the ball and they're out of bounds. So all right, Nathan, if on Jalen Milroe's long pass to Ryan Williams, if the Georgia guy was running out of bounds and taps the ball while Ryan Williams is running with it, that's an incomplete pass, or he's down right there? No.
Apparently so.
Been a rule in
so.
football. Since when is this? The only reason why that was called that way is because Miami is the ACC's only hope. They're their only hope. They're their only shot, because Clemson is terrible. Clemson,
but they're ranked.
That Georgia team just buried Clemson in week 1. That Georgia team struggled against Kentucky and then got beat against Alabama. Just like Nathan said, probably should have 2 losses on their schedule right now. I mean, Miami is the only thing the ACC has going for them. They cannot afford a home loss to Virginia Tech. They could not afford that at all. Look, Miami, it's not like the Miami offense played bad or anything like that. I think Virginia Tech just played really well. It was a fantastic football game, Friday night game. It's those are awesome. Those are awesome kind of games for it to be that close, that high scoring, and have that type of finish. But just like we said earlier, just like Nathan said earlier, the officials changing the outcome of the game is where we have an issue. Yes, make the right calls. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make the wrong calls. But let the kids and the coaches decide the outcome of the game, not you. You don't get to decide the outcome of the game. If the guy caught the ball in the end zone and scored, it's a touchdown. Just because Miami's ranked 7th and your conference's only hope doesn't mean you get to take that away from Virginia Tech. That's ridiculous. And I do want to make this note about officials. I want to say it was last year's basketball season. We got up here and talked about how bad officiating has been across the country. Not, one team bias, not one conference bias, but across the country in many ways of about how officials are changing the outcome of the basketball game. Well, now we're talking about football. Of course, we all understand there's human error in officiating. That's a tough job. I would never do that job. That's a tough job to do. But the number one rule of officiating, literally the first thing that you see on the officials training handbook for football, basketball, umpires and baseball, anything, is let the players decide who wins the game. You call it how you see it, but you don't change the outcome of a game because you want to. Officiating has gotten ridiculous. They absolutely hosed Virginia Tech. Miami, I think Miami's good enough to go undefeated, but they, in my mind, will have a blemish on their record from Virginia Tech.
All right, let's move.
And I got something to say about this because I was fired up about this in the moment. Number one, Virginia Tech, Kyron Jones. I had picked them to make the ACC championship, and that's not going to happen.
Well, they're to make Big 12, so
they're a very good team. They're a very talented team. They have not taken care of what they needed to do. They lost at Vanderbilt beginning of the season and overtime. They lost to Rutgers. They haven't done what they needed to do. But in this game, they did what they needed to do. They took care of their business and were absolutely screwed over. When you call a touchdown on the field, you have to have indisputable video evidence to overturn it. And they did not. I mean, they sat there for 10 minutes trying to dig up anything they could just to make sure Miami won that football game.
Yeah.
I don't know. They were fearing for their life that they were not going to make it out of Hard Rock Stadium because the number of inebriated Miami fans who don't have an IQ above 70 were going to probably kill them in the parking lot. I mean, that might happen. But they changed the outcome of the game. Kyron Jones completed a fantastic pass. The Virginia Tech wide receiver came down inbounds and had possession for a good few seconds. Yeah. And then he sat in the end zone with the ball and had possession until the Miami player touched it and freed it, which it shouldn't matter at that point. It's a completed touchdown. And Virginia Tech wins. The game's over. You sat there for 10 minutes and had this conversation with the league office, and they basically told you Miami has to win the game, figure out some crap to say, and get out of there. And that's exactly what they did. Cam Ward, absolute joke. I'm sorry. He has played. He's played great, but I've seen things from him where I'm like, he's making some terrible reads. He's throwing some terrible balls. He turned the ball over several times in that game, and he almost cost him that game. Guaranteed, he's probably the only reason they won it too. But he also thinks he's better than he is. I believe there was a interview after the game. He just says, "I'm the best in the game." Blah blah blah. Be humble, dude. Suck up. I mean, you almost lost to Virginia Tech. You're in the ACC conference. Miami hasn't been where they are right now in a while. be humble. Stop acting like you're better than you are. That's what I have. That's what I have a problem with Cam Ward. He acts like he's better than he is. He probably needs a job by now. I mean, how long has he played college football for? I mean, he has bounced around from team to team, and now you're starting to figure it out. Dude gets on my nerves. Yeah, Virginia Tech should have won that game. I'm getting way off track here. Virginia Tech should have won that game. I feel bad for Hiram Jones and the entire Virginia Tech team because they took care of their business and they rightfully deserve to win that game. Fantastic. I mean, with the way they competed. Now their clock management, awful down the stretch. I mean, they were almost not in the situation to win the game, but they executed when it mattered and they were absolutely screwed over. And that is the main gripe I have with it. So.
All right. Well, we only got a few minutes left here, but we need to cover this. It's a big story around the country. Speaking of somebody that thinks they're better than they are, after starting 3 games for UNLV, quarterback Matthew Sluka opted to redshirt and is expected to enter the transfer portal in December. Sluka's father and agent have alleged he was verbally promised $100,000 by UNLV's offensive coordinator, Brendan Marion, during his recruitment, but received only $3,000 from the school's NIL collective. UNLV said in a statement that Sluka's representatives made a financial demand for him to keep playing that interpreted as a violation of NCAA pay-for-play rules, as well as Nevada state law. They made additional statements saying they only promised him $3,000 a month for 4 months, so ultimately $12,000, and he wanted more money. He came back after the bye week. UNLV was undefeated. They're looking like they were going to be a CFP contender in the group of 5. His representatives came back and said, we want more money. We want this X amount of dollars to continue to play quarterback. UNLV told him to kick rocks. He did. He's in the portal. They go out this weekend with their quote-unquote backup, who actually was battling with Sluka for the starting job this offseason and didn't miss a beat. I think they played better. They destroyed Fresno State for the first time in forever for that team. So Sluka, he looks like a ding-dong. Then you have Bear Alexander over here, the same day as Sluka, USC defensive lineman. Now, he'll be forgoing the remainder of his junior season, redshirting, and he will use that redshirt to seek an opportunity at his 3rd different program in 4 years. And it's even worse. It's 8 different schools in 9 years if you date back to high school. So Bear Alexander lacks commitment. Matthew Sluka just wants money. Idiot. But what are y'all's thoughts on the state of college football and players redshirting now because they're not getting paid enough? Well, for Bear Alexander, he mentioned it was playing time, but we can all make the assumption it was more tied into probably NIL if we had to guess.
Yeah, just like what Nathan said, this is what we were afraid of all offseason and all talk about the NIL and how it was going to be implemented in college football and college sports in general. This is what we were afraid of, was crap like this, that, these agents and the greed hungry families and kids think they're worth something. You're getting a free college education. This is insane. I think it's pathetic. And then speaking on Bear Alexander really quick, 8 different schools in 9 years. That just, if you're an Auburn fan, that just sounds a lot like Justin Powell. If anybody remembers that name, that sounds a lot like Justin Powell went to 7 different schools in 8 years. It just lacked commitment, no confidence in himself to actually go out and compete.
I mean, I talked about it all offseason. I'm going to sound like a broken record here. This is basically NFL free agency at this point. Everyone just says, hey, I want money. You're going to give me money, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I think it's really on the fault of coaches playing into what the players wanted. I mean, you need to start giving them pushback. If you want to take control of this, and there's going to be rules and regulations set up, the coaches are going to have pushback and take control of the situation and say, we're not going to pay you this much. No school is going to pay you this much, but it's not going to happen at the end of the day because everyone wants to have a certain amount of talent on their team. And there will always be one FBS program out there that says, we're going to pay you money to come to our school now because that's now apparently illegal. It's just a terrible situation. And college football used to be about competitiveness and pageantry, and people were bought into the school they were playing for. And you used to see people go and play 4 or 5 years for their school. And now people are just saying, you know, you didn't pay me enough this week. I'm going to go ahead and enter the transfer portal. And you know what? They'll go and play on whatever team that decides to pay them that amount of money next year. And then when they decide that they're better than they are once again, they're worth more money, what's going to happen? They're going to do the exact same thing. As far as Barry Alexander goes, dude has not proved to me once on the football field he is worth any amount of money that he's probably getting paid. Dude's an absolute joke. Dude has commitment issues. He is. We talked about cancer to the locker room. All throughout college basketball season, he is a cancer to the locker room. He is a cancer.
Me.
Yeah, and Sluka's is just like that. If you're focused on yourself, if you're focused on individual accomplishments and monetary value instead of playing the actual damn game, then it is on you. So, I mean, maybe someone who has control or power in college football will figure it out. I doubt it. It's a wrap at this point.
No hope. There's no hope for college football at this point. No guardrails, no nothing. Sluka, I mean, you're the starting quarterback for UNLV. What makes you think you're getting paid $100,000? I don't think UNLV has the type of money to pay you, let alone more than 3 players on that roster, that amount of money. I mean, get over yourself. You're a good quarterback, not a great quarterback. You're average for FBS level. You played great at Holy Cross, but he's a good quarterback. It's just that money. UNLV, I doubt, has enough money to pay one person. They're not Alabama. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening and watching, students of the game.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.